Good morning and welcome to another edition of Lovin Daily, brought to you by Browns and You. I'm your host, Chris Perugine, joined today by Tim Duckno. Hi, Tim. How's it going?
I'm good, Chris. How are you?
Good, thank you. We'll just start with the headlines of today. So, Charmaine Gauci ends her press briefings as Malta moves on to the next COVID phase. So, no more Charmaine almost every day in our news feeds. Malta to allow up to 75 people to gather in public. An investigation opened over a horrific hate speech attack on a Maltese trans woman. A similar thing happening. San Juan FC sacks a nursery official over racist comments at a teenage goalkeeper. And the young bar owners fearing the closure of all our favorite hangouts unless there is more state aid given. So let's start with the first story, Tim. Charmaine, the end of an era.
The end of an era, indeed. So after around over 3 months, delivering regular, originally daily, but then a bit less updates on Malta's COVID-19 situation, Charmaine Gauci suddenly announced yesterday that she's going to stop delivering these press briefings. The reason being is that Malta has now, will as of tomorrow move on to its next phase in its fight against the virus. Now, this is very symbolic, obviously, because Charmaine Gauci really has become the face of all of this. To her credit, I don't think I've ever seen a person in Malta who managed to unite people that much behind her. But it is clear that the situation now is not as it was a couple of months ago, both in Malta and globally, and therefore having the public health chief delivering regular updates reflects a sense of emergency. And even though we technically are still in a sense of emergency, it's very clear now that that we've moved on to, as a nation, moved on to management of the situation rather than lockdowns and restrictions. And it's it's an end of an era and hopefully the start of a brighter one, right?
Yeah, and I think it's another sign after many signs being issued by the government that life is now back to normal. Obviously, Charmaine, as you said, has really connected with the public in a massive way. Yesterday, Labour MP Alex Muscat proposed for her to be given a Jihir Republica, and the reaction was widespread approval, unanimous approval. What's fun as well is Charmaine also really entered pop culture in Malta, besides T-shirts, as we're seeing, the one that we produce. Yesterday she became a meme queen once again when she was wearing this neon leopard skin sort of shirt. People compared her to people are calling her the Tiger Queen as a reference to Carol Baskin in the Tiger King documentary of Facebook. On that note, I'm very impressed at how she managed to have these great outfits in, day out, and great composure day in, day out, and great delivery, and and I think we really need to kind of just remember that it was great to see someone representing the country and the country's health system in such a good way. And from tomorrow, we're going to see the start of this full normality, or new normal, as people are calling it, right? So no Charmaine briefings, but 75 people being allowed to hang out in public together. So we've gone from 6 people to 75 people. Obviously, this means that it's not necessarily something that's going to be very easy to enforce, but it does give guidance of what is acceptable and what isn't, specifically when it comes, I think, to events and mass gatherings. So we know that mass gatherings were still not going to be allowed, but now I have an idea of what the mass gathering is allowed actually looks like, right? So if you are planning a wedding, for example, I guess you could have a 75-person wedding, but you can't have a 750-person wedding. And yeah, Tim, what does this tell us about the situation?
So this is another very clear sign of where we are, right? So measures were always going to be released gradually. So first, shops were allowed to open, but with very strict conditions. Then it was restaurants and cafes, and this limit on people gathering in public has consistently been decreased. So first it used to be 3, then it was 4, then 6, and now suddenly 75. And this is obviously also in the context of the Prime Minister, talking about some kind of amnesty mechanism for people who have unjustly been fined for breaking the 6 or 4 or 3 person rule. And I think it's a welcome sign, seeing as we're doing well in the fight against the virus, and something that all countries, well, a lot of countries in Europe are doing as well. So even in some countries, they've even relaxed it to 200 people. And I think it makes sense. Summer is now officially very much around the corner, and yes, now we can actually gather in public without hopefully the fear of getting sick with this virus as well.
There's also some new information about how the airport situation is going to work, right?
Yes. So as of 1st July, people from 19 countries, 17 countries and 2 regions, which are Sicily and Sardinia, will be allowed to visit Malta. This is obviously depending on the situations in their countries and on the airline. So like we say 17 countries, but Malta doesn't have a direct flight to Iceland. So unless an airline connects them, like, it's useless, because connecting flights aren't allowed. And there is a requirement that you would have had to do. No, sorry, there was a concern before that there could be some kind of border hopping. So, for example, Malta has opened its borders to Germany. And so what if Germany then opens its borders to the Netherlands or to Belgium? Can someone from Belgium go to Germany, catch a flight to Malta? The health authorities are saying that you would have had to have lived in the country of destination, which is in this case Germany, for at least 4 weeks prior to coming to Malta. However, we now know that the only sort of proof that you're going to be asked is your signature. They're going to ask you to sign a declaration, and it's not exactly foolproof, It's going to be very
Yesterday we also had 2 new cases of COVID-19 and 8 recoveries. So again, despite the opening of a number of measures for weeks now, still the numbers are very low.
Sorry, add something. Let's not forget that 2 weeks ago there were loads of warnings about a second wave and that the cases are going to spike and that the deaths are going to rise. This has not been the case at all. So let's be very careful when just throwing out numbers out there and throwing out predictions out there. I think that this is one thing that this crisis has shown us.
Yeah. Talking about things we throw out on social media and shouldn't. Yesterday we had 2 or 3 actually cases of hate speech. We'll start with the first one. A trans woman was being, totally disproportionately attacked and leveled with hate speech yesterday, just because she put up a political comment on Facebook. Angela Colero shared her views about EU funds, and suddenly, she got this barrage of hateful comments about how she is a man and how this is her name and how she shouldn't speak up because Labour gave her rights and all of this stuff. And Claudette Buttigieg, a nationalist MP, actually filed with her a hate speech report, and that's now launched an investigation. And we had a lot of people commenting about this case. We had Ira Losco, we had Adrian Delia, the opposition leader, we had Chris Fenn sending a private message to Angela Colero about this, and just I guess a reminder of how vicious people can be online, how tribalistic people can be online, and how maybe we haven't moved as far as we'd like to believe we have when it comes to LGBT acceptance in Malta, right, Tim?
Yeah, just another very sad sign of how, unfortunately, this tribalistic mentality often pervades so many debates in this country, that that some people unfortunately frame every single argument as a personal attack against the party, or against, which then is a reflection like as an attack against themselves. So therefore the response is, we have to attack them back. And it's complete schoolyard bullying, right? You try and find something that is going to hurt them the most, and you gang up on that person, and the intention is clear. You're trying to either scare them or to silence them. And it's sad. It's also extremely pathetic that you can't, like some people can't engage in actual discussion, and just keep bringing, keep making it extremely personal and trying to bring that person down.
And it's not just partisan politics. So moving on to our next story, yesterday another horrendous incident where a 19-year-old Maltese footballer, Rashad El Toumi, shared a bit of a Facebook post about Black Lives Matter, and suddenly he received this again racist abuse, saying that Africans should, black people should just belong in Africa, nowhere else. They're not people, they're Mauritians, and just like this very aggressive attitude to a Maltese black person, which is a concept, it seems, that defeats many people in their minds, that this cannot exist, and the reality is that not only can it exist, but it does and it's fine, and it's a positive aspect of our society. We had just a couple of days ago a similar racist racial abuse to other black footballers, Maltese footballers, who were on COVID calls discussing the horrendous situation, the horrendous murder of George Floyd, which, by the way, there was a bit of a positive update yesterday on that case in America, where the policeman who was the police officer who put his knee on George Floyd's neck, his charge has gone from a 3rd-degree murder charge to a 2nd-degree murder charge, and the other 3 police officers who were with him that day and didn't stop him have also been charged with aiding and abetting murder. So obviously there's a lot of riots going on still in the US, and there's a lot of peaceful protests as well, and it seems to be coming to a head. But this again brings back to Malta. You've got this racist abuse held at a 19-year-old footballer who just wanted to share his opinion about Black Lives Matter, and we had a similar incident, right, Tim? Another incident in a shop.
Yes. So basically, a Maltese. A black Maltese waitress revealed that a client had come to her cafe and refused to be served by her because she is black. Now, this may seem like a minor incident, but it really isn't, because something like this will really impact the person who's working. And it's like this is sort of everyday. You speak about George Floyd. This is something horrendous that shocked the world. You see this guy just kneeling on this man's neck until he died. But there is also everyday racism that does build up, and unfortunately some people even in Malta do witness it. Not only is that the case, but then when they speak about it, they get attacked even more for speaking about it. They say, "Oh, you're exaggerating it. You have an agenda," or something stupid like, "Are you just endorsing the riots and you want people to loot and to rob?" Again, ridiculous arguments, and again, just trying to prevent people from speaking.
I'd like to say something about Facebook as well. Is that I think one thing that we haven't yet fully understood is this reality that we, for the past 15 or so years, the world has been facing a situation of algorithmic content, right? Where our content is designed around, the content we receive is designed around what we're interested in, and that's what appears in our news feed. And very often that leads to extremism, right? Because we very, suddenly we hear only the side of an argument that we want. And we stop being appreciative of the other perspectives in society. So it creates extremism on both sides, and it's something which we still need to understand how that's going to affect our society.
It doesn't only impact the extremism, but people with louder voices do tend to be obviously more vocal, right? And it can give you a bit of a false impression of what the majority thinks, or what people are like as well.
Yeah. Moving on to our last story, Tim. Something about bars and hangouts not being able to survive this crisis.
Yes. So a young Maltese bar owner, Stella De Giorgio, she owns a very popular, very popular bar in Valletta, and obviously, like everybody else, she has been severely impacted by this crisis, and now she's, okay, fine. The government is giving aid to businesses. Businesses are now being allowed to open, subject to certain restrictions, plus the lack of tourists. So that's going to have an impact as well. And she's not mincing her words, Stella. She's saying that unless more direct state aid is given to businesses, they will have no other choice to close down. And when she says state aid, she's talking about, things like huge rent subsidies, up to 90 to 100% of their rent. Things like reduction of water and electricity tariffs, or else state reimbursement for investment that businesses have to carry out to be compliant with these new regulations. So, for example, that the state will pay for their hand sanitizers, for any perspex or cleaning that needs to be carried out. Obviously, this is in the context of the government's new budget that they're going to announce next week. But this is a massive problem that businesses are facing at the moment. So if your revenue suddenly goes down, but your rent remains as high as it was, since it was already high, and like this person in particular is paying 130 euro a day in rent. That's already high before COVID happened, let alone now. And I honestly don't know whether the government should be actually intervening in the market, because there's a lot of very serious economic considerations to be taken into account here. But or it can force the landlords to do something, but it definitely can't be ignored.
Yeah, and in fact, on Monday there's going to be this extraordinary budget, right, that the government has promised. So we'll wait to see what comes out of that. But it's a big discussion. I mean, some people would argue, the economy has changed, and we're just going to have to live with the fact that some businesses are going to have to close and some jobs are going to have to be lost. But obviously, a society that is used to zero unemployment, that's something that's going to be very hard for us to deal with. There's already thousands of people unemployed by this sector. I think one thing we need to remember as well is, maybe there wasn't a second wave yet in terms of COVID-19 crisis. But there is a fear that we will get a second wave of an economic hit if we don't pass the Malta test that comes at the end of summer. So we know that Malta is under a lot of scrutiny for its the way it's tackling financial crime and other matters. And if we don't pass this test, if we don't prove that we've taken enough action, we could be greylisted or blacklisted, and our reputation would be much worse in terms of whether people will actually do business with us or not. And that could affect gaming, it could affect financial services, could affect tourism as well in terms of our reputation. So I think it's really important now we kind of get things together and make sure that we can deliver on good governance, on proper tackling of things like money laundering and financial crime, and that we start propping up, our businesses to invest in job creation and other matters. That brings us to the end of our Lovin Daily episode of today. Thanks for being with us. Lovin Daily is brought to you by Browns and You. Tomorrow is Friday, so we'll have the last edition of Lovin Daily this week. Thanks for being with us, Tim. Have a good day and have a day full of loving.